The Eurozone was built on a paradox, an aspiration to a whole Europe, and yet, at the same time, as I've already indicated, the protection of sovereign power. So you got the creation of a common currency, but without integrating fiscal institutions. You got the shared currency to reduce costs of transaction, to bolster Europe's position in world trade, but you didn't get the shared economic institutions that would regulate capital movements, that would be some oversight to a developing European economy. This is the heart of the crisis of Europe today. A single European currency and no integrating economic institutions. Having said that, we need to recognize that the crisis of Greece is not the same as Spain and Italy. The crisis of Greece is in part one of excess public spending, of profligacy, of a lack of control of Greek public finances, which reflects a wider political culture. But in the case of Spain and Italy, what you've got is something very similar, particularly in Spain, something very similar to the 2007-8 estate agents crisis, property crisis in the United States. You've got speculative bubbles that have emerged around property that have collapsed, with banks holding all the debt. This means the European Union is faced with a number of crises of cash flows and of short-term liquidity. Can the European Union address this? On the one level, it ought to. European debt levels, taken as a whole, are lower than that of the United States. This is, above all in Europe, it seems to me, a cash flow crisis. The cashes and the reserves are in the wrong place. Is there a solution to that? I am myself part of those who argue for the fundamental importance of Eurobonds. I think Eurobonds would have created the liquidity to resolve this whilst engaging in the reform of certain economic practices and economic sectors. But will we have this Eurobond market, and will we have the will to create this kind of liquidity? If it's not a Eurobond, what will it be? Well, at the moment, the contradiction between a single European currency and the absence of stronger economic institutions, this contradiction is being played out, is being mediated by the very same states that have not wanted in the end to integrate sufficiently their economic management systems. So here we are, on the edge of a gigantic Eurozone crisis, where we are not short of liquidity in principle, where we're not short of resources, economic resources in principle, but they're not in the right place. And this crisis will be played out by European politicians. I hope that the answer to this will be that Europe, as it comes to the edge of the economic Eurozone abyss, will look into that abyss and find the political leadership to resolve this crisis once and for all. But at the moment, the leadership of Europe looks weak. Not because the individual leaders are weak. No one could call, for example, Angela Merkel a weak leader. Not at all. But Europe is faced again with this contradiction I keep coming on to, that leadership is accountable to territory and place. The leadership structures are still German, French, Spanish, and Italian. And yet the solution must be European. So here's the question. Will Europe make its leap now to Europeanism, to European institutions? And the second question is, if leaders do that, will they survive in the face of their electorates? And at the moment, we cannot be sure what the answer is.